Antoine Babinet, welcome to Digital Markets Research Hub. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to ask a couple of questions about the development, the latest development is Digital Markets Act. And maybe to begin with, I propose you offer to us more or less consistent vision about the development of the DMA enforcement regime in the last, let's say, over the last 4-6 months.
Okay, wow. You know that like 4-6 months when talking about the DMA, it sounds like a long time and a lot of milestones and achievement. But no, I'm very happy to do that. So, look, I mean, I think an obvious point in time for DMA enforcement was the 7th of March. So that was the deadline when the obligations became like fully enforceable, and the gatekeepers had to be compliant with these DMA obligations. I think since then, and just a few weeks after, there were a first batch of openings, so opening of non-compliance cases. And I think, I mean, if I take it from there, because I think it should be around, some like 3-4 months ago. And I think the question is, what have we been doing? I mean, clearly we've been working hard on these cases. And I think you can already see some clear milestones out there which confirm one thing, which is that DMA goes quick. And our enforcement actions, they're a matter of months, and they will be completed within the deadline of a year, which is clearly something that the DMA wanted to achieve. You already have preliminary findings that have been issued on 2 of the investigations, and the other investigations are well advanced as well. So that was clearly something that kept us busy. But that's in a way just the tip of the iceberg, because these investigations, they only cover some obligations. There are many more, and it's not that we sit tight and wait for investigations to complete and then turn to the rest. I mean, it's everything at the same time, and there we are very much still monitoring, really gathering a lot of feedback on whether solutions are effective or not, and on some of these areas, I mean, we are already in intense discussions with the gatekeepers outside of the framework of a formal investigation, but very much negotiating improvements, solutions through regulatory dialogue. So that's happening, very intense. And designations, because the scope of the DMA is not set. So we designated recently booking. We have an ongoing market investigation on X. And I think, I mean, the last milestone I have to mention is our first win in court with the Biden's appeal, where the court confirmed that Biden's, with its service TikTok social network, was rightly designated under the DMA. So I think, as you can see, it keeps on giving, and DMA is certainly very eventful.
This is really impressive catalog of achievements, I would even say, for such a short period of time. Let me ask you, you mentioned few issues which I wanted to go further, but let us do it step by step. The first one, which concerns or attracts attention of many of us, we see it's a sui generis regime, and it's sui generis enforcement team in a sense. So you are connected, having coming with different backgrounds from, let's say, simplistically speaking, competition background and more communication and market integration in digital area. Are you getting more and more synchronized? Was there a lot to synchronize with, or it's just a normal routine for such heterogeneous institution as the Commission to be constantly in communication with each other?
Look, okay, how can I answer that? I think I often use this line, especially when I talk to people who want to apply. I think the DMA enforcement team is as close as you can get of a startup when talking about the European Commission. So that means we are a very young team, very driven. People work hard, and we want to keep the organization very agile. We absolutely need that because like new issues pop up almost on a daily basis, and you need to be able to react quickly. To react to what you said, it is absolutely true that we are a very interdisciplinary team of people. I mean, we are also sitting for part of the team in DG Com, DG Competition, and the other part in DG Connect. But I think the reality of how we operate, and I think any stakeholders that work with us will tell you the same thing, is that we're very much one team. I mean, you don't talk to DG Comp, you don't talk to DG Connect, you're very much talking to the DMA Enforcement Team. And there is really some good synergies there. And now we are seeing them like full speed. Okay, maybe took a bit of time just to get organized, but as any new organization. And now I think we are really reaping the benefit of, I don't know, Comp as loads of experience in conducting investigation, more in the enforcement type of work. Connect, they are regulators. They are also maybe they'll be more focused on the certain very important aspect of this DMA enforcement work. So I think people will come with different ideas on how to do things. We all have the same objective to make it move forward, and it works pretty well. And in terms of the profile, I mean, we have lawyers. They are often highly specialized. We have lawyers that specialize in privacy, on the more business aspects of digital platforms. We have economists that do behavioral economics, and we have engineers as well. So this kind of rare profile of really technical people, but who really have also this feeling for policy questions. And these are really really valuable and profile that we're certainly using to the maximum, and always on the lookout for the new superstar we can hire.
And as a follow-up question, Antoine, if we talk about 80 people, there must be more, I imagine, and we talk about quite different core platform services. Is the expectation, but still there are many synergies, is the expectation that everybody has to know what's going on in all sectors or within the team, or you have already at this earlier stage of your startup specialization and narrowing down the scope and narrow specialism?
No, we are definitely specializing. I think we operate a bit like a consultancy. So you have a number of managers. The managers will divide between themselves the workload, like everything we have to do. So that will translate in a number of projects. And then the team members are staffed on several projects. So they won't just work on one topic, but they will typically be working on like 2 or 3 topics. And then, I mean, a lot of the coordination will happen at the management level, where we meet a lot to make sure that all the projects are progressing in a consistent way. And of course, it's also our role as managers to make sure that this consistency and this coordination also happens at the team level. So that's one of the challenge with the DMA. I think we already work really hard on our projects and on our cases, but if we want to be good at what we're doing, we also need to invest time to understand what's going on, on the office next door, or even like a couple of offices down the corridor. So that's, but yeah, that makes it super interesting for the team.
Absolutely. And another question which somehow comes from out of the previous one is that the end goal of fairness and contestability is, for right reason, in my view, is shaped in a very open-ended format, allowing us, I should say, to adjust depending on the circumstances and to interpret the goals, again, depending on the context, because the context can be very diverse, etc. But an implication, I wouldn't even say it's side effect, it's a natural organic implication of such open-endedness and of such long catalog of obligations is that you can do things differently. You are like a chef who can make out of same ingredients very different end products, so to say. If this is the case, or maybe I went too far with my try and attempt to visualize it. If this is the case, how do you need a consensus? And what is your view about the end goal? Should it be should we focus more on vertical stuff, on horizontal? Should we focus on specific core platform services or specific big tech gatekeepers? How would you present it to us?
Yeah, it's a lot of questions in one question, but but I think I can comment around it. I think the one point I want to make at the outset is I'm not sure there is so much margin for interpretation. I mean, I also think that we are enforcers. So I mean, what we do is that we enforce the law, and that law has been written. It's been written in quite a granular way. I mean, the obligations they've really been developed to be largely self-enforceable. And I think we should really not fall in the trap of certain gatekeepers who like to go around and say, "Oh, this obligation," but there are so many ways to interpret it. I don't really know what I should do, or I mean, there is a valid interpretation which is mine, and of course amounts to making the whole thing completely ineffective. I mean, that's really a game they're playing, right? I mean, very often, like if you read the sentence, you read the text, and it's clear to everyone what is behind it. Then, of course, if you're a highly paid lawyer, I mean, you can like just tweak all the words and make it say something else. But clearly, that's not what most of the people would read in it. So I think, I mean, very often, like we just don't see issues of interpretation. I mean, we're pretty clear on what the obligation should achieve, and that's what we work towards. Then, in terms of, I think the goals of contestability and fairness, they become more relevant and a bit more complex when the question is, how do we assess if compliance with the obligation is effective? Have we reached the good level of contestability? Uh, I think that's more tricky. I think the way we see it here is that our goal is to create opportunities, but they need to be true opportunities. So, if like gatekeepers will implement the obligation in a certain way, but it just doesn't work, it's just absolutely not effective, like nothing happens. So it's not translated in any like concrete impacts. And it's just impossible to say that this is good compliance. I mean, there is no true opportunity. There is just an opportunity on paper. And I think that's all we want to fight. We really want to make sure that the obligations, as they are written, the EU citizens will get, what they could expect from like a reasonable reading of them. And that sounds maybe obvious when I say it, but it's a constant fight, and it's not so obvious.
This is quite convincing. But what about the priority set? If you have shortage, or you can always have some, you have to be accountable in terms of regulatory resources and selecting which non-compliance investigations to open first. There is also room of discretion, and again, by turning blind eye to some, you somehow also prioritize.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think we turn a blank eye to anything. I think really we will never drop anything. What is true is that we can't launch 100 non-compliance cases at the same time. That's just impossible. So we have to make choices, and there it's actually like a lot of thought goes to it. I mean, we don't do that just um, randomly. I mean, we really analyze whether we think it's a strong case, whether it's a case that is a big ticket, so that really can achieve something that is significant for the citizen, whether we think it can be completely timely. I mean, there are many considerations that can come into play. As you say, I mean, there is an element of coming to a consensus. I mean, we will have an open discussion. People may have different views, but at the end, yeah, I mean, we have internal process to come to exactly this type of decision. And then, I mean, yeah, we have to start somewhere, but definitely because we did not to date initiate a given non-compliant case does not mean that someone is off the hook. That's embedded in the DMA that it can just come later. That's perfectly possible.
I think the answers to my previous questions would make the next one much less relevant, so to say, because you partly answered it already, that as an enforcer, you are not expected continuously somehow think of big strategic issues like European interest, or what would be the end result, how to open up markets, how to bring more contestability and fairness inside the entrenched digital core platform service. These are important issues, but they shouldn't preoccupy too much space. You have to do technical, you have to get your hands dirty, so to say. But yet, still having this, I accept I think it's a very important clarification from you, and I do take it as an important one. And yet, what would be, in your view, is there any trade-off between focusing on vertical issues and somehow going towards the line of caricaturized preference of acknowledging the status quo, but bringing more transparency, a little bit of fairness here, as Christina Kafar says, a little bit contestability there, or rather to look at horizontal issues and to challenge the status quo in terms of the players?
Okay. And just to clarify maybe what I said, I mean, I think our role is very much to enforce like the obligations we have. I mean, it's also our role to ensure that the DMA is future-proofed and evolves and continues like catching what is relevant. So that's also definitely our role to monitor the scope of the regulation, potentially like bring in more services and even like, extend it to other obligations. Now, I think your question, if I understand it, is a bit like, do we think it's enough to go for like more incremental benefits here and there, or like are we after like the big bang where we completely throw? So I think there again, like we want to create real opportunities. How they will then translate, what will business users and the market make of them, I think it's really hard to say today. I mean, I think we don't put any limit to it, right? I mean, contestability is the goal. So I think the bare minimum is that the business users feel that they truly, like, they're not impeded in their ability to contest. Then we won't do it all, right? I mean, once we've cleared a number of restrictions, I mean, they also need to convince users that they should move to their solution. And of course, I mean, we know it's not so easy because there is a great deal of inertia. The gatekeepers, they've been out there for a long time. But you could achieve actually really significant improvement in contestability if you had new or existing players that would just be like stronger in competing, and that you would just push the gatekeeper to really stay on top of innovation and to truly have the right prices, compete on the merit essentially, well, even if it's not a concept that is in the DMA. But I think that's also a result of contestability. So I don't think the DMA can only be judged a success if the gatekeepers disappear and stop being leaders in some of their markets. If it happens, great. I mean, that would have, if that's what, if it's the outcome of a market process, we'll take it. But that's not something that we have as an objective.
One of the tools which has been articulated on many occasions before the DMA has been adopted and in its UK equivalent is regulatory dialogue. More amicable, less formal or formalistic, quicker. Do you, from these first months, do you see that this mechanism is well, the promises are there, or it's something which has been overrated?
it has to be there, right? Because that's can only be the goal of the DMA. It's really how it should work. There is a regulation. Again, I think the obligations are sufficiently clear. They should be like there should be solutions, and it should be possible to discuss them and get to like good solutions. Now, are we fully there? Like, did we ever expect that it would work as smoothly? No, I don't think so. And the reason for that is that what is at stake in terms of business interests is just too huge. So I think, you know, the more you touch at the wallet, I mean, the more adversarial it gets. So this, I think we are seeing it clearly. I think you see it also because we felt that we had to quickly initiate like a number of non-compliance investigations. So I think that means that there is probably also a need for additional deterrence. It's not enough that the DMA is there, but we also need to enforce it and ensure our determination to really use all our powers. Hopefully, this will create an additional incentive that can then help more solutions to be found in the context of a regulatory dialogue in the future. But also, I want to come back to what I said almost in response to your first question. It is only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, these investigations, they are very visible, but there are many issues that are being sorted through regulatory dialogue. And in a way, it's true that, yeah, I mean, maybe we need to find a way to communicate a bit more on that. But regulatory dialogue is ongoing. It has been successful on many aspects. And I think the trade-off will always be there. I think we always want to start with regulatory dialogue. Then it also needs to be clear that, you know, at some point there is an end to this dialogue. And if the dialogue is not constructive, if we really get the impression that this will not get to a good solution, then the balance is slowly tipping towards investing the resources and the time to do a formal case.
Two scenarios. The scenario A, during the regulatory dialogue, the gatekeeper tells you, okay, guys, you're asking too much out of us. If we do this, it would imply A, B, C, D. If you really want us to do A, you should somehow give us some, at least informal signs that B, C, D, E, F will not be touched for X amount of months, that your priorities will go elsewhere. Is this scenario scandalous, or on the contrary, it's very ordinary, normal, conventional way, game theoretical way to do business?
No, I don't think we will do that, simply because it's not how DMA works. I mean, they have to comply with the whole obligation. I think we can, and I mean, it's also very important that, I mean, these solutions, if the discussions are happening between us and the Commission, I mean, on our side, we will always be informed by discussions with third parties, but it can never be good enough because the solutions needs to be seen by the market because they are the only ones that can really tell us if it may make sense to go with A. So I think, I mean, that kind of, because I have the feeling that you're hinting a bit at the kind of behind closed doors deals where you have a handshake, and no, that's really not how we want it. We want it much more transparent. And yeah, I mean, as always, like I guess the only moment, yeah. No, I think there's nothing to really comment.
Great. Yeah. Okay. And if you look at the designated gatekeepers, do you already start sensing their the difference in their understanding of how the DMA will function in the following years, and thus they have made different decisions in terms of, okay, let us try our best to defend our interest while complying, or rather going into more antagonistic way and trying to become, you know, to declare the war, so to say.
Yeah, no, we see different style. Clearly, I think it's probably influenced by also a bit the history in terms of having been confronted to proceedings in Europe. So that's something that definitely plays a role. Also, probably individuals who are involved. Um, I think you can probably get a sense of it. I don't know, for example, if you attended the workshops after the compliance date, I think it really transpired a bit from the presentation how each gatekeeper was approaching their compliance. One thing I have to say is that I think we are also seeing evolution in the compliance culture as we go along. So I think even like if you take the last 1 year, I think that's at least in some of the gatekeepers how they want to engage has evolved. Um, so I think that's also something that will happen. I think the DMA needs to be established. I think they also need, I mean, the people who are directly working with it in the company, I mean, they need to relay to the people who are actually calling the shots, and it will take a bit of time before they swallow it and they accept that this is the new world. We are now a regulatory company, a regulated company. Maybe there are things we could do before that we cannot do anymore. I think they also have to, it's also a process for them. So hopefully, as we go, like this compliance culture will become greater in the gatekeepers.
Another specificity of the new regime is that, contrary to some proposals in the parliament, we have that while being constantly present in the communication, the third parties don't have formal status of legitimate parties with legitimate interess, which, in my understanding, I think, is a very prudent way to protect yourself against the regulator, the different spam, so to say, as some colleagues would label it. Whilst your doors are always open to hear feedback and to do some different testing of different models. Do you see the level of engagement of third parties? Do you need these technicalities from potential newcomers or business users inside corporate form services? Do you learn a lot from them? How do you separate relevant information from the one which is totally opportunistic and somehow cooked?
No, we absolutely need it. We can do nothing without the input of the market players that are really impacted, and that can be the beneficiaries. I mean, if it will be only us, it's simply not qualified. I mean, we cannot be experts on all these services and all these gatekeepers. So I think what we know how to do and our main skill is to actually go out there and get the information we need to do the enforcement work. So I think we are in very intense and constant contacts with a lot of stakeholders. I'm pretty confident that no stakeholder that really engage with us through the right channels, so that really made the effort to send an articulated submission to us, will not have met us. I mean, that's the open door thing is real. And then again, I mean, I think we have a lot of flexibility. We want to stay agile, so we have many ways to engage with third parties, and we will do it differently on a case by case basis. So I mean, sometimes it may make sense to, I don't know, engage intensively with one given stakeholder because it just makes sense. Like some other time you want to hear like a greater diversity, and you do it in writing, or you will do a meeting, or you will do a meeting with like several stakeholders. I think there it's really we do what makes sense depending on the problem we face.
Hypothetical question or crystal ball gazing question, because a lot is at stake and because it is an experimental model where things are not very necessarily well articulated and refined and polished and established, we can anticipate that at least some gatekeepers will go to courts. So I wonder, do you have sufficient protocols in terms of anticipating possible risks and the trajectories, how the most creative minds, juristic minds will try to build up their case and thus to minimize these opportunities already from day one? Or you somehow think, okay, it's for legal services rather than for us. Is it something which is being thematized? And a second sub question, should the Court of Justice, or what is the position, what is the role of the Court of Justice in this constellation? Because they can mute or somehow discourage this enthusiasm, I imagine, quite quickly with a couple of decisions. Or you wouldn't worry too much about it? Again, crystal ball gazing question.
No, I mean, some of your question is very easy to answer. I mean, our team, like already in our team, we have many lawyers. So like when working, we are absolutely taking into account the fact that like sometimes the likelihood is very high that the decision we will issue will end up in court. So I mean, we definitely work with that in mind, which means that we always aim for something that is legally sound and that we find convincing. I mean, in DMA, maybe compared to other instruments, we are a new instrument. So in a way, there are many legal issues where there is simply no precedence, no guidance from the court out there. So, I mean, our team will just do what we think is the legally sound interpretation. But we have no guarantee that we will necessarily be followed. I mean, we're just doing it based on, again, like us being lawyer and analyzing the law. Then I mean, there are several layers of reviews. I mean, you quoted the legal service, they will be involved. I mean, they are the ones that down the line will defend our decision before the court. So of course they will they will review everything that before it gets out, because they need to be comfortable with it if they will be the ones defending it in court. Now, I mean, okay, how the court will approach what is put to it, I think is very much case by case. I mean, again, it all depends. I think if we did a bad job, I'm totally in favor of the court quashing us. I mean, that's a good legal system, so that's fine with me. I really think that we are all trying here, like, not to do a bad job. So I think when we do something, we're very confident that it will hold in court. So I don't think it's a big drama if the gatekeeper will take us in court. It's their right. We work towards that, and I think we will also learn from it. I think the court will also help us shape the interpretation of the DMA, and it can be very positive. I mean, if the court sheds some light on a given issue, I mean, that's also something that can unlock some future enforcement steps. So I don't think it has to be like bad news for us if there is an appeal.
Yes. A next question is related to the new commissioners and the role. It's a mature, established institution which is accustomed to significant political recalibrations and shifting the priorities. But how do you sense? Again, it has to be tested. But how do you sense? What's the level of or margin of discretion for the new commissioners to refocus? Maybe is it like insignificant, maybe shifting slightly something, or a lot can be changed?
I mean, it's certainly not insignificant, but what is already a given is that I think President von der Leyen, I mean, she outlined priorities for a new mandate, and DMA enforcement is in there. So it's already a given that we are continuing to enforce the DMA as effectively as possible. I mean, that will not change. I think, I mean, I'm also pretty confident that what is ongoing will stay. I mean, that there is no reason why this will change. I think new commissioners, of course, will come and they have a very important role in defining priorities. I mean, they always work based on recommendations from the team, but at the end of the day, I mean, they are the ultimate decision makers, so they are super relevant. But the way I see it is that, if anything, the list of our to-do list will get longer. So I don't think that anyone will get off the hook. It's rather, if anything, that they will have new ideas, and we would have to deliver on these new ideas.
Another issue which we started hearing more and more often, and in the less and less sci-fi sense, is the divestiture word being mentioned in different Chatham House conferences by people you would never expect even to consider it in terms of enforcement maturity and reliability of what they say. Is it something which feasible, plausible, coming from you at some point? And would it change significantly the very structure of digital markets? Is it an effective tool in the long term?
I mean, in DMA, like it's very clear where the possibility will become to exist. I mean, it is in the DMA. So if it has been put there, it means that it can be an option. But it has been put there after a number of steps, because it's only in case of systematic non-compliance. So I think it's still very early days in DMA. So before we reach the moment where, in a way, our conclusion is that we have tried to get like effective compliance, so more like through a behavioral type of action, but yet non-compliance case after non-compliance case, this has proved to fail. I mean, we would have to basically just look at the new menu of option that is open after systematic non-compliance. So I mean, I don't think it makes sense to really comment on this from the DMA perspective. Now, you're right. I mean, that's something we are hearing, especially on the other side of the Atlantic, in the US. I mean, they've done it in the past. I mean, I'm really not in a position to comment on their own case, and I think they're also, far from having settled how they want to go about the for example, the Google search judgment. But yeah, that's something that just comes up regularly. Now, I think you ask if it would change anything. I mean, I come from merger control. In merger control, you always want to go for the structural option. Structural option is a divestiture, but it's at the same time extremely different, because in a merger control situation, you will just prevent a consolidation. So I mean, your structural solution is that you just maintain the status quo. So you're not really undoing a merger. When you talk divestiture in this other context, like splitting up an already existing company, I mean, that's really different endeavor, where of course you're creating a lot of disruption. You put like synergies at risk. So I mean, I'm not saying at all that it shouldn't be on the table. But of course, I think one thing where we would all agree is that it's not a decision that can be taken lightly. So yeah,
We have absolutely. We have quite a very hot autumn in the pipeline, with one or two cases shaping the agenda of ex post competition law. Should we also keep our sensors attuned to the DMA enforcement team? Should we anticipate some headliners also in this field in the following months?
honestly, like, no, yeah. I mean, I don't think there will be a month without a DMA headline. But it doesn't have to always come from us, but from what I can see, it keeps on delivering. It's always eventful.
Another issue, the EU law, competition law academia is being affected by the DMA team. You keep appointing our talented peers to your team for right reasons. So I wanted to ask you the rest of the remaining part of EU competition lawyers. What would be the most direct, the most impactful contribution which can reach the mind and imagination and feelings of the DMA enforcement team? Should it be something technical, focused on a specific instance, or rather first order issues or something in between?
Yeah, it's true that we have hired a lot of academics, and they're great. Actually, they really have the right mind for the job. So we may continue doing that. But for those who remain in academics, and I totally understand that they will remain there, because it also gives you an amazing freedom. I think there are a lot of touch points. We often read papers. I mean, and by any mean, like if you think your paper is relevant to something we're doing, like you can push it to us. It's true that maybe something I've thought sometimes is, if academics can really try to make the effort to put themselves in our shoes, so really try to think also like, but this solution that I'm tabling it, I mean, it's beautiful on paper, but is it really something that can work out in practice? And really try to see also the constraints around it. And I think that's how it will really become more operational for us, and where we will really be able to say, look, I mean, that's something we can really use as such. Because yes, sometimes you have contributions where, I mean, the ideas are again like we almost thinking, yes, I would love that, but this will never happen, you know. And so I think that's maybe a piece of advice, if and I think, you know, if yeah how can they learn? But I think you know, I think you perfectly can see, uh, you know, what our constraints are, and what can work or not in practice.
And the last question, Antoine, your recommendation to those, I imagine you have a long queue of people wanting to, students, graduates, wanting to commit the entire career or significant part of it to this, the most inspirational, the most attractive part of public service and overall career start and continuation. What would be the selling point apart from working harder, waking up earlier, reading more, etc.? Is there any features which students could practice in the following year or two in order to bring with them in it alongside the traditional must-have catalog of features which most of your peers possess?
Oof. No, I think that's true. I think it's a super good field for students to invest their efforts in, because one thing for sure, it will keep on giving. So I think it's not something that is just a hype for a couple of years, but I think this instrument and everything around it, I mean, will become a big topic for many years to come. So I think just in terms of, you know, if they're thinking I should pick something where there will be interesting jobs for me down the line, I mean, that's a good field. And I'm not even thinking commission. I mean, there are so many people who are directly or indirectly working on DMA. Then how they should go about it. I mean, I think we really hire a mix of profiles. So yeah, yeah. I don't think there is just one profile that we will consider. I think the must-have is, of course, you need to demonstrate that you are. It's true, we have the luxury to get a lot of applications. So I mean, typically we will go with people who are really like showing with concrete elements in their resume that they are into tech regulation. And I guess there can be many ways to do that. You know, if you will write a very relevant thesis on a topic that is a topic that will really be present in our mind, that's something we like. If you, yeah, anything you can do a bit on top of the usual, like, yeah, the usual courses that really show an extra motivation in the field. that can make a difference.
Antoine Babinet, thank you very much indeed for this really informative, fascinating, illuminating conversation. It was a pleasure to seeing you.
Thanks, Aless.